you.
Thank you very much. You are welcome to today's presentation. And the title of our module today is Auditing HR Systems. But before we move to today's presentation, I want to remind us that we did make a presentation yesterday on HR auditing methods. So today we are going to look at the HR auditing of HR systems. As we have indicated before, the audit of HRM consists of several pillars, which include assessing the effectiveness of HR systems, which we are going to look at today, 2, HR policies, 3, HR procedures, and 4, HR culture. So I'm excited to be with you today to look at how we can go about auditing HR systems. A system, as it were, is a set of interrelated parts that work together in harmony to achieve set objectives. In HR, there are various systems that we are going to talk about, which are interrelated in more than 2 ways. And these systems help us to understand how the HR function works. As a system in HR, we talk about open systems. And open systems are designed in a way that they receive inputs from the environment and they give outputs to that environment. This suggests that the HR system we are talking about is an open system. We receive information, we receive data, and we even receive employees from our environment. That becomes our input. And then we process this input through data analysis or through interpretation of the data, and we produce outputs. It is intended that through this HR audit process, we will produce a report, which will be our output. So the focus of our presentation today, or module 4, is mainly on the HR functions, which are in one way or another related. And each of them complements the other. There is none of them that work separately. For example, human resource planning feeds into recruitment. Recruitment feeds into training and development. Training and development is supported by performance appraisal, and even compensation are all related. So having said that, I want us to look at the scope of today's discussion, which is the areas we are going to discuss. As you can see from the screen, the first area is manpower planning. I will talk about it in detail as in the next few minutes. But briefly, let me say that manpower planning is a process. And this process involves forecasting future human resource requirements and how these requirements can be met. At the end of this process, because it's a system, we expect to have the right number of people doing the right things in the right way, at the right time, and at the right places. If you listen to what I've said, HR planning is ensuring that the right things are done in the right way at the right time. So without a proper HR plan, we may have trouble having people to do the right things in the right way. So if you have wrong people in the wrong jobs, then it means that they are not going to be productive. So through manpower planning, we are likely to have these right people doing the right things in the right way at the right time. And it's an effort that we can make as HR managers to ensure that it is working. So our audit is to assess whether there is a human resource plan in place, how it works, how it was developed, and how can we measure the success using various metrics. Secondly, we have competency mapping. By this, we mean aligning the skills, knowledge, abilities, and experience of our employees to the jobs that they are doing, as well as the corporate strategy and objectives. So as we bring people on board, we look at their competencies and assign them the right jobs, which we have created through manpower planning. And when we assign them the right jobs, we also project into the future by looking at the current skill sets that people have against what we are likely to require in the future. Competency mapping, therefore, helps us to assess the extent to which people are performing their jobs with the skills and knowledge that they have. If there are discrepancies in competency mapping, then there is a possibility that there will be lower productivity among our employees. The other element we are going to look at is the recruitment audit, where we are looking at the whole process of recruitment from need identification, advertising, shortlisting, interviewing, selection, appointment, induction, placement, and lastly, onboarding. So as you can see, this is a long process, and it's part of the system that we are discussing here today, Auditing HR System. So recruitment is a system of its own because it consists of several components from need identification to job analysis. And at each of these stages, we must get feedback because in a system, there is always the input, the process, output, and then feedback. So all these are likely to give us the feedback on how well we are doing as HR managers in regard to recruitment and selection. On training and development, we are going to look at the effectiveness of this function, particularly with the various components that are related to training, and try to link training with 1, succession planning, 2, career development, 3, performance management, and 4, compensation. that if we have a well-trained and developed crop of employees, then they are likely to produce results when we appraise them. Or when we have developed and trained people, it becomes easier for us to develop career plans or career paths. And this is something that we are going to discuss in detail under this module. Item number 4 is performance management audit, where we are going to look at the systems that are being used in performance management, particularly performance appraisal, because as organizations, we need to be clear on which of the methods that can give us the best results when we are appraising people. We will mention various methods that we can use in performance appraisals and management process. Let me also mention that performance management is a broad process, and the performance appraisal is a component of this process. So it is a system as it is, as I have mentioned in HR auditing, HR systems audit. Then number last, we are going to look at career development audit, especially for those people who are joining the industry or the organization today. Even those who have been around, there's need to look at their career development and audit whether or not there are such opportunities for them and how best we can improve this process. It is argued that career development is one of the retention strategies. So we are going to link career development to training, to retention, to even performance, because in career development, we can train people either in various certifications or taking them to educational institutions to equip them with the relevant skills. So we are going to look at career development as a key area in auditing HR systems. So having said that, I want us to go to the specifics regarding all the 6 key systems that I have just described. The first one is manpower planning audit techniques. And from number 1 to number 7, which I will show, these are the techniques that are used in manpower planning. I have indicated in my introduction that manpower planning is a forecast of future human resource requirements and how these requirements can be met. And when you talk of requirements, I am referring to the number of people our organizations are likely to require, or the skill sets that will be required in the future. So that is the requirement. Requirement in 2 ways. 1, the numbers, and 2, the qualities of people required in the future. And then the forecast should take into consideration changes in our environment, because our forecast cannot be 100% accurate. But as HR managers, we should be flexible enough to accommodate changes in our environment, which will make our organization to be agile. Otherwise, if we remain rigid, we are likely to break, and breaking can be very dangerous. So to start with, there is workforce analysis. Workforce analysis is similar to conducting a headcount or a skills inventory. A headcount will give us the numbers of people who are in various departments. And a skills inventory will give us the skills, knowledge, and experience that people have in different departments. So in workforce analysis, I've indicated there in bullet 1 that we are going to assess or audit the current employee skills inventory and competencies. So what are we going to audit in this area? Starting with skills. Skills are specific abilities that people have to perform their roles or jobs effectively. There are various skills that all of us may be having, and I can say 1 is communication skill. 2 is technical skill. 3 is leadership skills. And 4 could be computer skills. So when we do a skills inventory in HR audit, we are going to look at the various skills that employees have in all the departments, so that when we think of promoting a person, we know that the skills that these employees have. Or when there is need for career development, we know the skills that they have. Or when we want to develop career paths, we know where to go. And if there are inefficiencies in this system, we shall know through this audit. Because by auditing the skills that people have, we are likely to identify skill gaps. And if there are skill gaps in our system, then we can make recommendations as HR auditors. When it comes to competencies, still on number 1, these are the qualifications that people have, either in terms of 1, education, 2, training, or 3, experience and abilities or attitudes. So in workforce analysis, we audit the skills and the competences that people have. Secondly, on workforce analysis, we have employee demographics. We are looking at the composition of our employees, and 1, we want to find out whether there is a balance in terms of our diversity in employees. So somebody may ask, why do we need to know something about age, for example? Age is a very important factor when we are managing people. 1, we want to know the age of people so that we can make plans for them in terms of training, in terms of career development, and even in terms of recruitment or promotion to higher levels. We have different age groups in our organizations, and we can utilize them in different ways. For example, in a buddy system, those people who are fairly advanced in age have acquired skills, knowledge, and experience, and therefore they can mentor new ones. These new ones can be younger in age. We can also use age as a way of compliance. Compliance because we don't want to employ people who are underage, because the Employment Act does not allow minors to be engaged in formal employment. We can also look at age in terms of retirement. We look at people who are about to retire and then plan for their exit. Though there are those who can retire early, but all factors taken constant, we expect that people will go all the way to the retirement age, which in Kenya is 60 years. So there are many ways in which we can use age in our human resource plan and as part of forecasting. So when you are forecasting, for example, succession, you look at the age of people. Those who are about to exit, you prepare for their replacement. About tenure is the number of years that somebody has worked, or sometimes the contract they hold. Speaking of years, we are looking at whether the organization has a mix of experienced people who can deliver results. So when you are auditing, you can look at the tenure of people and plan for them, either in terms of training, in terms of promotion, or in terms of compensation. I'm not saying that those who have stayed in an organization are eligible for better pay, but people with experience are likely to earn more compared to people who are joining the industry today. Yesterday, we mentioned something about diversity. These are the differences in terms of background among our employees. So if you are talking about public sector, for example, you may need to balance the ethnic background of people. Gender is also an element of diversity, which we also need to balance here. Religion can also be used as a way of balancing. So when you are doing a HR audit on manpower planning, you may look at all these demographics and use them effectively. If there are any gaps, as a HR auditor, you should be able to pick them out and make recommendations. On turnover rates and reasons for turnover, usually we conduct a turnover or an exit interview. Turnover rates is the speed at which people join and leave organizations. So people can leave organizations for various reasons. One, upon attainment of the retirement age. Two, resignation. Three, voluntary layoff. And four, dismissal. These turnover rates can be used by HR managers to predict the number of people who are likely to leave the organization in the near future. How can we do this? We do this by auditing the exits for the last 5 years, for example, up to today. Based on those turnover rates over the 5 years, you are able to pick a trend, and from this trend, you can forecast the possible numbers of people you are likely to have in the future. Exit interviews will give us the reasons for turnover, and from these interviews and the reasons they have given, we are able to put in place corrective measures. So workforce analysis involves those three key aspects. And now we move to the next one, which is demand forecasting. Demand is about the number of people and the qualifications we are likely to need in the future. By future, we mean anything in the short term, medium term, and long term. So you may require people in the next 5 days, 10 days, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, or even 10 years. So demand is about estimating the number of people we are likely to need or require in the short, in the medium, and the long term. So in our audits, we are going to look at the accuracy of our forecast, the number of people that we are going to require. And you can establish accuracy by, one, conducting a trend analysis. a trend analysis at two levels. One, at the organizational level, where we are looking at the number of people who are recruited or promoted within a year or 2 years or 3 years. So taking stock of the numbers, we are able to forecast the number of people who are likely to join the organization. And this will be informed by the rate at which the organization is growing, because when an organization is growing, there is demand for labor. So if the organization is growing, we are likely to need more people. That is expansion. We also may need more people or even new people when there is new technology in the market. So you can demand or require people because of changes in technology, and that is what you should be measuring. Bullet 2 looks at the trend in workforce requirements based on business objectives. And I want to believe that our organizations are growth-oriented. And if there is growth, we look at growth in two ways. One, market growth, and two, product growth. Market growth refers to the number of branches or strategic business units that we open as a result of growing demand for our products. And we can also grow in terms of products because our business objective is to diversify. Either diversify in a related field, which they call conglomerate diversification, or an unrelated field, which they call concentric diversification. So these two can give an indication of where the organization is going. Is there growth in terms of markets, or is there growth in terms of products? Because in each of these, we require more people, because demand forecasting will look at the requirements for labor. And lastly, on that point, there is market conditions. Market conditions here refer to, if I may mention, two things. One, the competition, the level of competition in the market. Organizations are competing for mainly two things. One, customers, and two, employees. So depending on the market condition, your employees can be poached, as we have witnessed in the mainstream media like television. So poaching is a reality in some organizations where those performing employees are taken to other organizations. So one of the market conditions we are talking about is competition. The second condition in the market is technology. We are in a technological space, and a lot is happening around this space. So in forecasting demand, you'll be looking at the technologies that are coming into the market, which are likely to cause two things. One, to disrupt the way we do our business, and two, requiring employees to acquire new skills and knowledge. So in terms of demand, we are looking at the disruption that is going to be caused by technology. So if technology is going to disrupt, then our forecast in terms of numbers and qualities will be affected. Because as we know, technology can perform the work of many. So if you bring in technology, then your demand forecast is likely to show a declining demand because of technology. So as HR managers, demand forecast is a key component because this will tell us the number of people and the quality that we are likely to require in the future. Then based on these two aspects, that is workforce analysis and demand forecasting, then we are likely to identify gaps. Then number 3 is supply forecasting. Supply is the number of people we are likely to have compared to demand, where demand is the people we are likely to require. Supply is the number we are likely to have in the future. I have indicated potential internal candidates because it's not possible to determine potential external candidates unless you have the figures which you have obtained from data organizations which they can sell to you, or you have conducted a survey to know the numbers of people in the market outside. Looking at the internal market as a source of our recruitment, we will determine this by analyzing the trends that we have mentioned, and then look at the key roles that we are likely to recruit people or candidates and their potential to occupy those key roles. Who are the people with potential? These are the people who have the likelihood of, one, being leaders. So those employees who have leadership abilities are potential candidates for succession. 2, a person with skills and knowledge. This is potential. And 4, a person who is innovative. That is a potential candidate. So when we talk of supply forecasting, we look at those people with potential in terms of experience, in terms of skills and knowledge, and in terms of innovation. Secondly, we look at the labor market conditions and how available these people are. Currently, as we speak, the market is moving towards technology. And for that reason, many people at the individual level or at organizational levels are going to look for people who are data analysts, who are cyber security experts, or who are AI conversant. If we look around, these are rare skills that people have, and therefore you are not likely to have them in the market, and you cannot readily recruit them. So organizations are looking at the labor market in terms of technology and the skills that are emerging, so that as you forecast your supply, you are looking at the people you are likely to have. So if technology is coming, then you are likely to have fewer people to work in our organizations. And then lastly on that point is retirement, resignation, and promotions in an organization. For retirement, these are people who are exiting either early before they achieve their retirement age, or retiring upon attainment of 60 years. What about retirement in terms of supply forecasting? It is because these exits affect the numbers. Because supply is about numbers. It reduces the numbers of people that we have. So good organizations are those who have adequate plans. Now that we talk about human resource planning, they have adequate plans for suitable replacements for those people who retire. Secondly, resignation, which is not very healthy for an organization, but resignation is a right of everybody, irrespective of the level in which they are. People resign for various reasons, but it's a right. You can't stop a person from resigning. So resignations also affect our numbers. Promotions also affect numbers, because a person is promoted to a higher position from a lower position, which means that one, there is a person who has left in a higher position that affected the numbers. Two, there is a vacant position that has been left by a person who is being promoted. So either way, there is a number that is affected in supply forecasting. So when you focus this supply, you are looking at retirement, resignation, and promotions, and how they affect the numbers that we are likely to have in future. Fourthly, based on supply forecasting and the demand, we identify gaps. And let me briefly explain this gap. That demand is the number of people we are likely to require. Supply is the number of people that we are likely to have. So the keyword there is require for demand, have for supply. So we compare these two. That if demand is more than supply, then there is a deficit. A deficit is a gap because you have a shortage of people, meaning that you require more than what you have. And then vice versa. Where supply is more than demand, it means that you have more employees than you want or than you need. So what happens in this case is that you will have a surplus. A surplus is a gap. And therefore, if you look at point 1 under gap analysis, you will see that this is a way of identifying the difference between the current workforce and the future needs. So if you compare these two, you will identify those two gaps. One, a shortage, or two, a deficit. These deficits and surpluses may be in qualitative or quantitative forms. So quantitative forms refers to the number of people that either are a surplus or are a shortage. And then you look at qualitative. This means skill shortages. Qualitative, skill shortages. Either now you require certain skills, or in future you may reduce certain skills. For example, there are certain skills that may be rendered redundant or have already been rendered redundant, and that is secretarial. Very few managers today have secretaries to assist them. So that is a shortage of skills that we are going to require in future, though it's a good shortage, so to speak, because we don't require them. And anything that you don't require is a cost. And then lastly, as HR auditors, we look at the timelines for addressing the competency gaps, the timelines of addressing the shortages. I will be discussing the next one, but let me address the shortages. When you have a shortage of labor, in terms of numbers and skills, you recruit. So when you are preparing your human resource plan, you look at the gap, and if the gap is a shortage, then you engage in recruitment and selection. The opposite of recruitment is redundancy. So when you have a surplus, you are likely to declare some people redundant, meaning that they are excess. What is likely to cause excess? One, introduction of new technologies. Two, change of business. Three, mergers and acquisitions, which you call strategic alliances. And four, some jobs becoming obsolete. So if this is your forecast in terms of supply, then you are likely to have a surplus of people. So you declare them redundant, and if they have nowhere to fit, either through secondment, through redeployment, you are likely to declare people redundant and therefore retrench them, retrenchment. So those are the two ways in which you can address these gaps. The two gaps I've said are shortages, where you recruit new ones, where there are surpluses, you declare them redundant, and possibly retrench them. Retrenchment is painful, but sometimes you may have to go that way because you have a business to run, and therefore you can only wish people well in their future endeavors. So in point 3 under gap analysis, we are looking at the time taken to find suitable replacements and the time taken to remove people who are not required from the system. Number 5 is succession planning. Succession is about preparing lower level employees to occupy higher positions. And in terms of human resource planning, because that is our first area under auditing HR systems, we are looking at the people that we have in our system. So by comparing demand and supply, you have identified the two gaps. However, in some cases, you may not have a gap. What you have is that the demand and supply are balancing out. So when they balance, it means that you have enough employees so that you don't need to retrench and you don't need to recruit. Another word for enough is that you have optimum numbers or qualities. And these are the ones that we want to retain. So those that we retain will need to replace those who leave the organization. So those who leave the organization are replaced through a process of succession planning. So in succession planning, we look internally and look at the number of positions with identified successors. Remember, I said a little earlier that successors are those people with the potential. These are the ones to take over those key positions. So as HR auditors, you need to look at the numbers. Why? Because these numbers will create a pipeline of qualified human resources to occupy senior positions. Otherwise, if you don't have these adequate numbers, then should there be a vacant position at a higher level, then you find that your pipeline is dry. You don't have a suitable replacement. This will mean two things. One, there is a crisis because there's nobody to find a replacement. Or two, the positions will remain vacant for as long as you have not found a suitable replacement. If you don't have the right numbers, then as a HR function or manager, you may be a weak link. And that is why we want to conduct these audits to ensure that in our pipelines, we have suitable successors to take care of those people who leave. Secondly is the readiness level of potential successors. I would prefer to look at these levels in three ways. One, there are those who are ready now. These are people who can replace anybody who leaves like today. So those who are ready now. meaning that they have been prepared adequately to succeed those who leave. Secondly, there are those who are ready soon. And by soon, I mean anytime between 5 months to 1 year. So those are those that will be ready soon, meaning that there are certain competencies that they may not have to take over from those who leave. And lastly, in terms of readiness, there are those who will be ready later. These are the ones probably who are joining the organization in their careers, and therefore they have not acquired relevant experience to take over those people who are leaving like today. So in your audit, and I believe you'll be developing a checklist, you'll be looking at those readiness levels and tick boxes. In this department, for example, finance, there are 10 people who are ready. In production, there are 8 people. In HR, there are 5 people, and so on. So in your audit, you look at the readiness levels, because if employees are not ready, then you will have a crisis should there be exits. On bullet 3, we are looking at the development progress of successors through training programs. One of the ways in which we prepare people for succession is training. So we need to train people on a continual basis. Though in government or public sector, they may be constrained by resources, and that does not mean that even private sector don't have this challenge. But the first casualty which usually is affected when we are implementing austerity measures is training. However, this should not be a limiting factor. As long as we have adequate programs and budget for training, we are able to prepare these people for succeeding others. On number 6, we are looking at the skills development program and looking at the number of people who have participated in these programs. 2, improvement in skills after training. And 3, satisfaction levels with the training program. And that is why we audit the training programs to find out, 1, the results that have been produced after training, 2, the change in behaviors, and 3, the reactions to the training, whether it was relevant or not. So we expect that as HR managers, when we are doing our manpower plan, we will be looking at the skills development programs in terms of the participation of employees, how they have helped them to improve, and the extent to which they are happy with those programs. Moving on is the last one, that is regular monitoring, that you monitor the HR plan. By monitoring, we mean that you continuously collect data, analyze it, interpret, so that you can always address gaps which may arise in this journey. And then you may need to develop key performance indicators with respect to the HR plan, which I will show probably tomorrow when we shall be talking about HR strategy. And then lastly, responsiveness to change. How ready are we for change when there are changes in our environment? I mentioned yesterday that organizations that survive are those that can respond to change in a flexible way. We know that HR planning is based on forecast, and the changes are many in the environment, and therefore we should be ready to embrace change when need arises. I have discussed the 7 key elements associated with manpower planning, and I want to invite any one of us who has a question or a comment that they can make before we move on to the second component of Auditing HR Systems. Any questions? The floor is open. Hello, any question? Any comment, if there is any? I can see Lulu here, Konyi, and Beatrice. Kadani Tafana, how are you, sir? Oh, there's somebody online? Go on.
I wanted to say it's clear. I think from my end, I would say it's clear. I don't have any question.
Oh, thank you very much. If there is no other question or comment, I suggest that we move on to the next component of auditing HR systems. If you look at the little photo that I have there, I'm sure all of us have interacted with this photo before. Speaking of competency, I want to hear your reactions. What do you think about this photo? Hello? Can you see the photo from your end? Yes. Lulu, how are you? Go on, can you make your comment? Okay, let me ask guided questions related to this photo. There are these two people at the center of this railway line. Who do you think they are? Okay. I can say they are either project managers or supervisors of the employees who are looking at them. If you look at their body language, apparently they are pointing fingers at each other. That each one of them is responsible for the mess they are in. This suggests several things. That the two supervisors could be incompetent in their work. That they have reached this far and they could not easily tell whether this railway line is going to work. Either they misinterpreted the plan, which is a competency issue, they were unskilled in terms of project construction, or three, they did not guide their employees well to ensure that everything was in order. So as you look at this photo, there is no train that is going to run on this rail. The same thing happens to our organizations, that if there is a mismatch between the competence of employees and the job they are doing, you end up with an organization that is dysfunctional. Look at the employees. They are relaxed and enjoying the argument between the two supervisors or project managers. So as HR managers, we are here to provide guidance and direction in terms of our human resource function. Otherwise, employees will look at us as we are afraid when it comes to those board meetings, and the people will be pointing fingers at you that you have failed in your work. If you look again at this photograph, apparently nobody did an audit of what is happening and what is likely to happen. That there was a future connection between these two lines. They ended up with only one line that is connecting and the other two are disconnecting. So going to this competency, as HR auditors, we are going to define what constitutes competency. And we must define these competencies in very definitive words or statements. We mentioned on Monday or Tuesday, where we were looking at the competencies that HR managers require, and I will mention a few of them. One is communication skills. If you look at our little photograph down there, probably there was no communication. Communication on the direction in which the railway line was taking. Two, another competency is technical skills, which is understanding of the human resource functions. So if you don't have the technical skills as a HR manager, then it becomes difficult for you to do your work. Other competencies include experience. Again, going by what we have there in that photo, it appears that these people did not have experience in railway construction. And that is where they have ended where they are. If we are to avoid ending up where this railway line has ended, then in our competency mapping, we should be clearly say which of the competencies are required in all the departments. And that is why when we are doing recruitment and selection, the technical experts who are going to receive this employee must be there during recruitment so that they can ask all the right questions and then have the right person doing the right job for which they are being interviewed. There are other competencies that we need, like report writing skills. And again, when you talk of competency mapping, we are looking at those people who are competent or who are able to do reports. Secondly, we are talking about alignment. And as I have indicated, this is the degree to which a person's abilities and competencies are related to organizational values and goals. Values touch on culture. Culture are aspects like what I mentioned yesterday. One, the values. Two, the norms. Three, the beliefs. Four, the stories. Four, artifacts. Five, leadership, among others. Strategic goals are the objectives that an organization wants to achieve in the long term, medium term, and long term. So in terms of competency alignment, we are looking for the people with the right mix of skills that will fit into the organizational culture and by extension, organizational values. So we are talking about alignment. And alignment can be done at any level. One, during recruitment. Two, during performance appraisal. If people don't have the right skills, they should be aligned. Three, during training and development, people should be aligned. So this alignment ensures that an organization achieves its strategic objectives and that the employees fit into the value system of the organization. And that is why we insist during recruitment that a person's competencies that they demonstrate during interviews should fit into the organizational requirements and not vice versa. There's no way we should change our strategic goals or values and then align them to an individual competency. Then the interests of an organization will come second, and those of the individual come first. It should be the opposite. And then look at employee competency levels. This is the amount of skills, knowledge, and experience that somebody has, and these are likely to affect their performance. The higher the level of competency, the higher the potential of an employee performing well. And again, looking at that picture down there, you look at the competency levels, we can say that they were largely lacking. Lacking in both groups. And that is where they are in that situation. Then in terms of competency mapping, we look at gap analysis, which are the skills and knowledge that we are lacking, and that can be done in many ways. I will only mention one, that you can get a gap analysis through training needs assessment, or two, through performance appraisals. These are two ways in which we identify competency gaps. I repeat, one is through training, where you conduct a training needs analysis to identify a training gap, and two, performance appraisals, where you are going to identify performance gaps attributed to lack of skills and knowledge. Moving on, we talked of succession planning, and we are looking at the readiness of the potential employees to succeed others. And that is why we need to do a competency evaluation. How competent are the current employees to take over from those people who leave the organization? The other aspect is competency framework utilization. I believe those of us working in public sector, there is a competence framework that we are given by the Public Service, or SCAG, which guides us on the skill set that we should have at all times. So when we do an audit of the level to which we utilize these competencies, then we are likely to identify gaps, the level of utilization of these competencies. Some people may be utilized highly and possibly overworked, and some people may be underutilized. And that becomes a gap, because those who are underutilized, they may be earning money for free. And those who are overworked are likely to leave the organization because of stress and burnout. On the retention rates, we are talking about the rate at which we retain those people who are competent. Usually we retain people who have the right skills, knowledge, experience, and talent. These are the competencies we are looking for. So retention rates refer to the number of people who remain with the organization for a period of time. So the retention rate is the number of people who are left over the average number of people who are in the organization. If you multiply that by 100, you get your retention rate. This is a concept that we will discuss, and I will invite you to join us in human capital analysis, where we shall be analyzing the retention rates. The other aspect is career progression. We all aspire to progress in our careers or advance. And how do you progress? You can only progress if you have the right competences or competencies. So this is an audit of competency. We have the next one, and before we go there, I would like us to have some comments about this competency framework or mapping before we move on. One or two comments because of time. Beatrice, if you are there, any comment? Kadani, if you are there? Okay, it appears that we don't have any comments. And for that reason, I will move to the next part, and that is recruitment audit. In recruitment, we are looking at the whole process that will enable us to have the right candidate, the right employee to be deployed to the positions that we have identified to be vacant. It is always a requirement to determine the need before you commence the process of recruitment. Need identification. A need, as we have said, is a gap where you have a shortage of skills and knowledge of people, or a shortage of numbers of people. So what can cause this shortage? And I mentioned earlier, one, an employee has resigned, and therefore we need a replacement. And for that reason, we recruit new ones. Two, an employee has retired. Three, an employee has been laid off. And four, an employee has been terminated. Five, an employee has died, God forbid. So this need can arise anywhere within the organization. It can be in a marketing department. It can be in finance. It can be in HR, or any other department that we may have in our organizations. So once we have identified a need for a new employee, internally the need will be for purposes of promotion, and externally we recruit to make the process competitive, and that is why we bring people from outside. So once a need has been established, we look at the job descriptions if they are adequate. So a job description is a statement of the duties and responsibilities of a job holder, meaning that we cannot engage in recruitment before we develop a job description. If it is a new role, then we develop job descriptions afresh. And if it is an existing role, then we review the job descriptions with a view to, one, enriching the job, or two, eliminating duties or responsibilities that are redundant or are no longer useful. And how do we develop job descriptions? As a HR auditor, you will find out whether there was a job analysis, because job analysis helps us to develop job descriptions. And from job descriptions, we develop job specifications. And from job specifications, we develop person specifications, which are all very key ingredients when we advertise. So these job descriptions must be very clear, because we don't want to have problems when we advertise these positions, and then so many people apply and we have a crisis of developing a shortlist. An example is where you have so many candidates applying, and then you take another whole month to do a shortlist. That can be very tedious because of a poor job description. So in recruitment audit, we look at clarity of job descriptions and the key requirements in these jobs. Secondly, we look at application. People cannot apply before you advertise. So as HR managers, you are expected to find out whether the sources of applicants were identified. There are two sources. One, the internal source for promotion, and external sources. Because people cannot apply without you attracting them. So what precedes application is advertisement. So where were the jobs advertised? And for public sector, they must be in mainstream media so that you attract as many people as possible and you comply with the requirement that the job was open to the public as opposed to in-house appointments. Once the advertisements have been placed, people will apply. And then you ask yourself as an auditor, what are the provisions for application? There are two provisions here. One is an online application, and two, a manual application. These are acceptable. Now that we are in the digital space, it could be encouraged that people apply online. However, there are some organizations which still accept manual applications through the post office. That they did not or they were not late in because they sent their applications through the post, or others, probably by senior people, meet the deadline of the applicant methods that should be used in applications. Secondly is the screening process, where you sift the applications to identify those who meet the recruitment and selection criteria. Screening can be done manually or digitally. Manual screening can take long and is very tedious. And in your audits, if possible, you can find out why people did not use a digital system if it exists, and they resorted to manual screening. Some people have experience with manual screening, where you advertise one position and you have around 120,000 people applying. I'm trying to imagine how long it will take for any department like HR to wade through the masses of applications to develop the long list, leave alone the short list. Some people have experience of shortlisting about 5,000 for one position. And how long can this take to interview people? 5,000 people being interviewed for one position. Unless an organization is setting itself up for a crisis. This may require either you stop working and do the shortlisting and the interviewing, or you hire the services of a consultant to do the screening. So the audit will look at the methods of application and screening which are used to ensure that we get the right person on board. 3 is the interview protocols. These are the rules and regulations governing the interviews. We expect that through this interview, we are going to get the right person to be allowed to join the organization. Interviews can take many forms. One, it could be a panel interview. 2, it could be a performance demonstration interview, or it could be a group interview. So during the interview, there are certain protocols that you may use. One is to use an interview checklist or questions which each of the panelists is going to ask. For purposes of consistency, panelists should ask the same questions to all the candidates who are shortlisted for interview. And if there is need to ask probing questions, they should not deviate so much from what others have been asked. During interviews, again, you can have tests for the various candidates. These tests can be aptitude tests or psychometric tests. These are easy to conduct because it allows managers to eliminate those who don't qualify very quickly and concentrate on those who have the potential to join the organization. For selection criteria, we are looking at making a decision from among all the qualified candidates. You have interviewed them, and now it's the time for you to choose, to select. There are various methods that managers can use to select those candidates. One, which is the most common, is the rule of 3, where 3 names are presented to the appointing authorities for selection. 3 names. That is what you call the rule of 3. Secondly, you can use a ranking method where people are graded from the first to the last. That is ranking based on their performance in the interview from number 1 to the last. And the appointing authority can select either number 1, number 2, number 3, or even the last. And then the third criteria or the third method is merit rating, where you identify key areas which should be the focus of the selection and select people based on how they did in various categories. So if it is about technical skills, a person could be selected based on that area. Or if it's social, a person is selected because of the position they are going to occupy, which requires social skills. So that is it about interview and protocols, as well as selection criteria. Next, after the selection, you go to onboarding. I'm sure there are other things that you do in between selection and onboarding. For example, background checks to ensure that the person you are bringing is the right one, or as questions in relation to their previous employment. And we need to get the history of this. So background checks are also important before you make the final selection. However, in public sector, I am reliably informed that background checks are done after onboarding. So onboarding is about preparing employees before they report, when they report, and after they report. It's a long process where managers introduce people to the organization once they have been given appointment letters. So part of the preparations that you have is to provide any paperwork to be completed by the newly selected person or employee before they start working. So as HR auditors, we are going to evaluate the comprehensiveness and effectiveness of onboarding initiatives. Comprehensiveness means that they are very detailed and they capture all the key areas to ensure that the person settles in very quickly and starts working. For effectiveness, we are looking at the results that we get from onboarding. That an effective onboarding process is one that satisfies employees or makes them happy. 2, it makes them enjoy the process. 3, it makes them settle very quickly. 4, it makes them start working and producing desired results. So in recruitment, onboarding is one of the processes where we find out whether the process was effective and that there was employee experience that they start working to produce the results. When I talk about experience, employees get an impression of who we are through this process. If they don't see any future in the organization because of poor onboarding, they are likely to leave very quickly because there's nothing binding between you and them because they have formed an opinion about the organization because of the way in which we have handled onboarding. Next, under recruitment, we look at the equal opportunity employment. And this is a policy area where human resource managers ensure that in their policies, they have this clause. And I quote, "We are an equal opportunity employer." That gives people confidence, especially those who are applying for the first time, that they stand a chance of being employed. And secondly, it shows that there is no discrimination when it comes to matters employment. So equal opportunity employment is one of the compliance issues, especially in public sector. And this is a good practice which is recommended for all sectors. As you audit, find out whether there is equal opportunity employment, and this can be demonstrated by the type of people who are hired. If there is an imbalance, probably in terms of gender, then the equal opportunity employment is at question. Or if there is an imbalance in the people who are promoted, probably only one gender is being promoted, then that is not an equal opportunity employer. So as you audit, find out from the ground through the methods that we mentioned yesterday, either through interviews, through questionnaires, through observations or documents, to find out whether there is equal opportunity employment. Secondly, is the time to hire. How long does it take? And again, depending on the sector, in government, it can take a minimum of 3 months to fill a vacant position. And it can take as long as 1 year or even more. And that's why we hear that people are in acting positions for a long time, possibly because there are gaps in the system. Ideally, in the era of technology, the time to hire should not exceed 1 month from the time a gap is identified to the time that gap is filled, a maximum of 60 days. If it takes longer, then there are inefficiencies in the system, and probably that could be an item in your audit report. The other one is background checks, which I've already mentioned. Don't do background checks too early unless you have intent to hire, or too late when the employee has already been given an appointment letter and it becomes very difficult to terminate. So the background checks should be done in time so that we comply. And the beauty is that these background checks can even be done after appointment because somebody will be on probation, especially for new employees. A probation can be terminated depending on the performance of this employee, or if there's something new that has arisen because of a background check, nothing stops organizations from terminating that contract. For example, fraud, and if the employee did not present this information, and then we have a right to terminate. Or if the employee presented fake papers, again, we can terminate and possibly prosecute this employee because they have uttered a false document. But that is a rare way to go. Sometimes we ask these employees to leave at their own volition. Next is the candidate experience and feedback from the whole process. How do they feel about it? As I have just indicated, the experience that people have through this process will determine whether they stay or whether they leave. And they can give us feedback. You give them forms that they can fill and let us know how the training, rather the recruitment and selection went. So that is the third aspect of auditing human resource systems. Recruitment, as I have said, is a system. And again, I'm now inviting questions and comments based on recruitment audit. Any question that you may want to ask, kindly ask. Saranjeri, if you are there, please make a comment or a question. Neptune, if you are there, please ask. Bit. If you are there, the floor is yours. You don't have a question. And my assumption is that we can move, we have understood, and therefore we can move to the next part, and that is auditing of training and development. I may not go to the basics of what training is, what development is, because we are all familiar with these concepts. Why? Because training is basically performance-oriented and development is growth-oriented. So for us to audit this training and development part, we need to look at the various aspects that will become a subject of our audit. One is the training needs assessment, because we all know that without this process, there is no possibility that we can conduct an effective training and development program. So training needs are gaps that are identified as a result of performance evaluation. So these gaps can be in form of, one, wastage of time and resources or materials. Two, delays in performing a task or delivering a service. Three, accidents because of lack of skills and knowledge. Four, experiencing difficulties in performing a task. So all these are performance gaps. And when you conduct a training needs assessment, the cause of these gaps must be, and I repeat, must be as a result of lack of skills and knowledge. Anything else that causes these gaps cannot be a training problem, or only when the employees have exhibited lack of skills and knowledge is when you can train. And this can be done in-house, or you can get a consultant. The audit questions that you will ask in respect to training needs analysis is the process of identifying training. And in this process, you should be thinking about participation. Was there effective participation between the supervisors and the employees for identifying these needs? Two, the process could be the design of the tool to collect data during needs analysis. The tool must be adequate. Was there a questionnaire, an interview, or that? Three, you ask whether the training needs assessment was relevant. And then after that, you identify those training needs, and then you continue to the next stage, that is designing the training program. A well-designed training program has the following components. One, the area to be trained. Two, the objectives of the training. Three, the providers of the training. Four, the resources required during training. Five, the outcomes expected from this training. And six, the time for training. When will the training take place? But all this should be aligned with the organizational objectives, because we don't want to design a program which is not going to achieve an organizational objective. If the objective of the organization is to increase productivity by 5%, then this training program should be aligned to the achievement of productivity by 5%. So design a program that is objective-oriented. And the boxes that you will be ticking, including the training program, the training schedule, the training materials, and the trainers. The trainers must be qualified. The second aspect under delivery, under training and development, is the method of delivery. There are many ways in which training can be delivered, either on the job or off the job. On the job methods are those trainings that take place within the premises of an organization. And I can give a few examples of on-the-job training. One, it can be sitting next to Nelly, where an employee sits next to an experienced person. So the Nelly is the experienced person, and a new employee or any other employee who requires skills can sit next to him. So that's a method called sitting next to Nelly, which is on the job. Number two, another method of on the job is simulation, where people are trained within the organization, but using simulators, machines or equipment that are close as possible to those that are actually used on the job. Simulation. Three, the first training that we receive on the job is induction. So we induct people so that they can acquire knowledge about their job and about their environment. Other on-the-job methods include mentorship and coaching. So these are methods that we can audit to find out if they are delivering results. Off-the-job methods refer to those initiatives taken outside the organization, probably in a training institution. And there are many of such methods. For example, online learning, like the one that we are holding now. Two, we can have institutionalized training, where you take people to colleges or universities to be trained, or it can be workshops, conferences, and seminars. To make the training more practical, sometimes people use what they call case studies, where you visit an organization from which you want to learn, and then expose yourself to what they are doing better than yourself. So in this way, you will learn through case studies, and you may have to visit physically. Those are the two methods that are used, that is on the job and off the job. So as an HR auditor, you are looking at the effectiveness of these training methods. Then number 4 under development, training and development, is participation or participant engagement. Organizations are a democracy, I believe. And in a democracy, employees participate in decisions or on matters that affect them. Training is a key element which affects employees in terms of their careers and in terms of their performance. So as HR managers, we should look at the level at which, or the level to which employees are engaged or participate in training and development programs. Participation is key. Why? Because it helps us to reduce chances of resistance. 2, it helps us to ensure that the employees own the process. Otherwise, if you impose a training on people, they are likely to reject it, and that will be resistant. Or 2, if you force it on them, they can go for the training, but it is irrelevant. And then the trainer qualification is another point which you need to audit. Why? Because the trainers can mess your employees big time. Whether it's an on-the-job training or off-the-job, the trainers must be having the right qualifications. And here we are talking about 1, the clients they have served, if it's a consultant. 2, the number of trainings they have conducted before. And 3, the results that they have produced, so that we can pick them. So trainer qualification is key, because we want the right skills and knowledge to be imparted to our employees. And that's why even in TSC, those of us who are conversant with it, TSC is Teacher Service Commission, that no person can be hired as a teacher unless, 1, they have a teaching qualification, meaning that they are qualified teachers. And secondly, they have a TSC number. This is what will allow them to teach in schools. Previously, without these qualifications, we had many of our children messed up because of hiring quack teachers. And this can mess up an economy, because we are talking about human capital, which starts even from primary school, secondary, high school, or even universities. So we need to have it right, that the people or the trainers have the right qualifications, because for the trainees to acquire the right skills, then the trainers must impart the right skills. In your audit, you look at the background of the trainers and find out whether they are qualified. There are other things that you need to look at during training and the development audits. And the other one is training materials and resources. When I talked about designing a training program, I talked about resources. Without these resources, there cannot be an effective training. Which resources do we require here? One is human resources. Two, financial resources. And three, physical resources. Human resources are the support staff who will facilitate the training. Financial is the budget that we have to support the training. And by the time you conduct a training, there should be an adequate budget, which I'll talk about in bullet last. And lastly, the physical resources. These are like offices where employees will be mentored or coached from. Two, boardrooms where this training can take place, or a designated class where training can be conducted. If it is something like which are resources should be available for people. Next is the training. We can establish the end process of this training program. Because in training, you identify training needs. Two, you develop a training program. Three, you develop training resources. Four, you implement the training. And five, you evaluate the training. So the second point on my screen, we are talking about training evaluation. Did it create an impact or a difference in people's lives in an organization? There are four ways of assessing the training. One, the transfer of knowledge and skills from the training environment to the workplace. For instance, we are in this class being trained on HR audit. It is expected that after this training, you will transfer this knowledge back to your organization. So this is a way of sharing your knowledge after training. So we will find out through the audit whether there are forums for transferring training and learning to the workplace. Secondly, under evaluation is the behavior. Has the behavior of the trainees changed? If it is time management where people come late because of poor time management, that behavior should change from poor time management to effective time management. So the second aspect is behavior that should be measured. The third aspect is reactions. The reactions of the trainees to several things. One, to the relevance of the training program. Did it satisfy a need? Two, the environment in which the training was taking place. Was it conducive? Three, the content of the trainees, of the training. Was it adequate? And if it's an off-the-job training where people are being trained from a hotel, for example, they will assess the food. Was the food okay to support training. So when you assess the reactions, we are looking at all those areas which can affect training effectiveness. And then number 4 is the results. You evaluate results. What is the output of employees after the training? So we expect improvements in performance as a result of the training. So if I may repeat in bullet points, the areas to look for or audit in training evaluation are 1, the transfer of knowledge, 2, the behaviors, 3, the reactions, and 4, the results. Then lastly, we talk about budget and resource allocation. As it is, training takes resources or requires resources. And therefore, as you audit the training component, you will ask the respondents whether there is a training budget, the money allocated for training. I want to believe that in all our organizations, we have a training budget every year, which we always present to the authorities for approval. And because training is very important, our budget should also be adequate. So the other question you ask is the budget adequate? So if it's inadequate, you may end up with very few trainings or no training at all, which may affect the performance of employees. Resource allocation, I mentioned that we require 3 resources: human resources, financial resources, and physical resources. And the audit question you will ask is the adequacy of the resources allocated, adequate. And the second question you ask yourself is the time for allocation. Is it timely? It is pointless to conduct a training by allocating resources very late. Probably you are closing a year, especially for public sector organizations. You are closing a year in June. You allocate the resources on 29th of June, which means there will be no training. So resources must be allocated in a timely manner to allow for employees to go for training. So that is very important for us as HR auditors to ensure that we have conducted the training in an efficient and effective way. Because we are auditing training, we are looking at the systems, the processes, and the procedures. Having said that, again, I will want to ask questions on training and development audit. Any reactions? Neptune, if you are there, you can answer. You can ask a question.
Good evening, teacher.
Good evening to you.
I have a question, or probably it's a concern,
Yes.
on the approach that can be used to train staff, or when you are doing the audit. Can you use team building, of course, with a theme, using a professional builder to enable your teams to be trained on aspect at the same time, of course, now the fun that comes with team building, but at the end of it all, you are passing a message or you are training on a specific aspect like communication, customer care, all those, time management. Thank you. Then when you are now doing the audit, probably what are you supposed to look at if you use team building as the aspect of training and development? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Neptune. Yes, team building is a very important way of bringing cohesiveness among employees. The intention of team building is to ensure that people work together cohesively and that there are no conflicts among them. However, you can also conduct team building to equip people with certain skills, especially of social nature. Because in team building, we are coming from different backgrounds and different departments, and therefore training people on a specific skill like HR audit can be difficult under such circumstances. So if it is communication that you want to train people in, especially in a social environment like our organizations, then team building becomes necessary. Because sometimes people don't communicate because they have not provided themselves with the space or opportunities to interact. For example, finance people rarely interact with HR or rarely interact with marketing. So by bringing them together through team building, they are able to interact and communicate with each other and also try to understand each other in terms of their functions and how they can work together. So team building brings people together to understand each other and also to develop basic social skills like communication. The other skill that we may acquire through team building is empathy. Do we empathize with others when they are in problems or when they are facing challenges in their lives? Sometimes we are given challenging tasks during team buildings, and it requires team effort for us to work on that challenge. So in our organizations, we face various challenges, especially when the level of cohesion is very low, and we want teamwork for us to improve our productivity. Neptune, I believe we do team buildings because we want us to work together to produce better results than when each department is working alone. And that's the synergy that we want to achieve. And I want to agree with you. Yes, you can acquire skills like social skills through team building. However, if there are technical skills that we want to acquire, then the methods that I mentioned, either lectures or coaching and mentoring, could be appropriate in this case. So team building is basically to bring people together so that they can work together as a team and produce better results. So they can acquire those social skills and they can work better to improve their performance. Thank you.
I have a question, please.
Yes, ask.
Not per se on what we have been going through today, but
Yes.
relevant or related to training. So there is the regular training programs that we do for staff, of course,
Yes.
based on the skills gap. And then there is the training for the CPD, which is a matter of compliance, because the professionals or the expertise who need CPD points, they may not be able to renew their certification at the beginning of the year, or if they are required to do an expert opinion, they cannot be allowed to sign it on behalf of the institution if they are not in good standing. So I just wanted to hear from this team, you as our facilitator and trainer, based on your years of experience, and also my colleagues who are here, then the experience he has had. How are you able to balance out these two? Because a lot of times we are constrained with the budget, especially in the public sector. And when you're constrained on the training budget and you have very little amounts with you to deal with, how will you create a balance here so that you don't leave out the people who require CPD training because then you are in trouble. The expertise will not sign opinions on behalf of the institution. And when you consider them, when you give them the priority, again, the rest of the team feels that they are discriminated for people who will never need CPD points. They feel like they are discriminated. So how are you able to create this balance? Help me out, please.
Thank you very much. I'm happy that you opened the question up to everybody. Before I answer, maybe I can ask anybody who can respond to that question. Anybody with an opinion who can respond to that question? Is there anybody who has raised a hand here? Let me see. So far, none. Okay. Allow me to answer your question, starting with the first one aspect of your question, and that is the training programs that you have developed for your team in an organization, which requires a budget, and how do you balance between the budgetary constraints and the training? As HR managers, we may want to use training as one of our KPIs, as a key performance indicator, that we conducted this number of trainings and we trained this number of people over this 1 year. Speaking of budget, because you have developed a budget, and this budget can be done at 2 levels. One, there are those individual trainings where the supervisors identify skill gaps which employees may demonstrate, and therefore we develop individual training programs for people to acquire those skills. And the second type of training is the corporate training. For example, you have mentioned that you may be in public sector, and this is in regard to your ISO certifications. For example, ISO 9001, ISO related to health and safety, and others. These require people to be trained in large numbers in order to comply with that ISO requirement. So you have budgeted for this, 2, individualized training and corporate training. However, because of budgetary constraints, you may not train all these people. What you may do in consultation with your senior managers is to review the training programs and identify priority trainings, which means that you cannot do without these trainings, and then approve them so that people can acquire relevant skills in this area. And again, because it will be an audit query, if you don't have a record to show that you reviewed the plan against the budget and you have notes to that effect that can explain that gap. Otherwise, the Auditor General will come, say you did not conduct trainings as required, and therefore you have to explain. But when you have notes that you have taken, a record of the reviewed training, that we had a target of 10 trainings, but because of the budget, we have 5. And why did you choose 5? Because of the priority areas. Then you have an audit query. So what I'm trying to say in terms of the program of training, there is room for flexibility based on the budgetary constraints. The second part of your question was on CPDs. That for professionals like us, we need to renew our practicing certificate every year. And that requires a minimum of 10 points. And to acquire these 10 points, you need to be trained, which means continuous professional development, like what we are doing today. There are two scenarios here that the organization can pay for those who are attending programs like this to renew their practicing certificate. Or two, the individual professionals will pay for themselves. Where the individuals are to pay for themselves, it means that there is no budget for it. And where the organization provides, then there is a budget. So if these are the two scenarios, and then you can develop it as a policy that either those who are undertaking professional trainings for CPDs, they can be sponsored by the organization, or they can be reimbursed a percentage of these trainings by paying for themselves and be reimbursed. In some places, they train themselves and they can be reimbursed 100%, or others a fraction of the training for CPDs. And the other question you said is, how do you find a balance between CPDs and those people who are not professionals? For those who are not professionals, there is a provision for individualized training based on their needs or their performance gaps. So if you take people for training because they have a performance gap, that is good enough. And that could be a motivator for people to go to class to improve themselves. And for general staff, maybe they are not professionals, like cleaners. Because there is no professional body for them, you can sponsor them for basic training, like customer care. The fact that somebody is doing cleaning does not mean that they cannot handle customer care. So as a way of motivating them, you can take them for basic training so that they can also feel part of the organization. I think I've answered your question unless I've left something out.
Thank you. I am sufficiently guided.
Thank you. Any other question? Somebody who has a question so that we move on? Okay. If there's no question, I'll move to the next part in the interest of time. Just a second, let me see, yes. The next part is performance management. And then after that, we can do career and then close the session. Performance management, we said, is a long process, starting with planning. Planning for what? Planning the objectives, the resources, the timelines, and the budget for conducting performance. And after that, we implement the program arising from the target. And then from there, we do a performance appraisal to determine the level to which employees are achieving their targets. And then we reward those people who perform well. And those who don't, we might give them sanctions like PIPs. And if not PIPs, we can put them on notice that they are under scrutiny. And after that, you can now monitor to find out areas of improvement, and that makes it a continuous process. Because the moment you monitor, you find new gaps, and that become a subject of new performance appraisals. So when we audit performance management, we are looking at the whole process from beginning to end and finding out areas of strength or areas of weakness. Where there are areas of strength, we maintain, and areas of weakness, we improve. And that brings us to that performance appraisal process, which is a component of performance management. The areas that we could be looking, and this is not exhaustive because there are many things that you can audit under performance appraisal process, is the frequency and the consistency of appraisal. Frequency means the number of times we conduct these appraisals. For public sector, it can be 1 year. It's a cycle of 1 year. However, for some departments or agencies, they can do it quarterly. After every 3 months, there is an appraisal, and they do it 4 times. The frequency is 4 times. But majority of government institutions is half yearly, and then the final one at the end of the year, which ends in June. That frequency is an audit aspect because we want to establish whether there is a trend. If it's not frequent enough, for example, you take 2 years to conduct an audit. That's a very long time. Why is it a long time? It may not give you accurate results of what happened within the 2 years. Or 2, many things will have changed in between, and therefore you may not have an accurate picture of what people have done and their output. So frequency is important. It is recommended that if possible, people conduct appraisals after every 3 months. However, I can give you an experience I had with an organization, which is a consultancy firm, where they conduct appraisals every day. I don't know how that sits with all of us. It can be very difficult, but they do this on a system, a dashboard where everybody evaluates everybody on a daily basis by posting their assessments on the dashboard. So if you had a meeting, for example, this meeting we are having today, you can assess the contributions of all of us. My contribution, Sarah's contribution, Kadani's contribution, Lulu's contribution, and others. And we can rate ourselves. Those who are quiet get 1. Those who are moderately active get 3. Those who are very active get 5. And everybody knows that so and so got these marks on this day, on this date. And this is worked cumulatively to assess the person at the end of the month, at the end of a quarter, or at the end of a year, which I found to be very good, because if you are relying on memory, and our memories may not be very sharp, taking a long time can give you biased results because we do forget. So frequency leads to consistency. So consistency is the regularity of the training, which gives us a trend. From this trend analysis, we can say that this appraisal has been successful or not, or whether it is predictable. We want systems that are predictable. If the performance appraisal is not predictable because it's not consistent, then people do not know when it is done, how it will be done, and this makes people get lost. Secondly is the clarity and the relevance of the performance criteria, meaning that when we sit down, those in public sector, you have a PC, a performance contract, an agreement between you and the supervisors of what you are going to achieve in the following year or in the following quarter. So this criteria could be in the form of 1, timelines, 2, targets, 3, qualities, and 4, probably revenues, if you are in a revenue center. So this criteria is what we shall use when we are evaluating the performance of a person. So how clear are these criteria? If they are not clear, you cannot blame a person for performing poorly because you didn't take the initiative to ensure that it is clear, precise, and relevant. Next is the employee participation rates. Appraisal is a participative process. Without this participation, there is no ownership. So how many people participate in this process? Traditionally, we used to be given targets and we are told, go and work on them. But today we sit with our supervisors, agree on the targets, and then implement whatever we have agreed on. That becomes a contract. So the rate of participation will determine whether there was an effective appraisal process or not. Then secondly, we look at goal setting and alignment, where goal setting can either be consultative using an MBO process. MBO is management by objectives, where you set objectives in a consultative manner, and then they are implemented with the support of the supervisors. So if we have objectives to achieve, they should be aligned with the total or overall organizational objective. And again, what we measure in this area is the clarity of the individual and the team objectives. Clarity, they must be very clear. As we all know, objectives are SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. When you talk of specificity, we are thinking of numbers, for example, that if we are to improve our revenues, then we must attract enough customers. But you don't use the word enough because enough is not clear. So what you need to do is to identify a figure. Say that we should bring at least 20 clients per month for us to generate the revenues that we want. 20 clients per month. So anybody who is going out there has in mind that there are 20 clients to be brought on board. So specificity is very important because it leaves no room for ambiguity. Secondly, under goal setting is the alignment of the goals with the organizational objectives. That as HR managers, we set goals, for example, in training, or now we are talking about performance management. In performance, one of the goals we may want to achieve is reduction of customer complaints by 10%. And that will feed into the overall corporate objectives. So what do we need to do then to reduce customer complaints? One is the quality of work that we produce so that we reduce customer complaints. 2 is the communications that we do so that a customer is always involved in areas where they are affected. And 3, we become proactive by looking at the touch points of our customers. So in that way, you'll be setting goals that are aligned with our objectives at the corporate level. And then lastly is the rate of goal attainment. And that is what we measure as we plan this process of performance management. The number of goals, you can tick them in a box where you have 5 goals and you achieved 3. Is that good enough? You had 5 goals, you achieved 4. Is that good? And that is the way in which we are going to measure our performance or the way we achieved our targets. In public sector, they use broad terms like attained or rather attained expectation, or above expectation, or below expectation. Within this, there are certain parameters that you'll be looking at. For example, if it's above expectation, you may need to show, probably as evidence, what is this that you brought in which is above expectation. And you must quote, you must give a quote, especially for those of us in public sector. Below expectation means that you have scored below 70%. Then that means you have a potential improvement program. So that the employees, whether they are excess, you will be looking at is the regularity of feedback. Loose cases, especially in court, is when we are asked the support that we give our employees as they were performing their functions. That our supervisor waits until the end of an appraisal cycle. That's when they are giving a rating, probably a poor rating. And when there's a poor rating, there's a cost to it. Somebody may be written a short course or be dismissed. So the regularity of feedback will tell us whether we are on the right track before we allow an employee to perform so poorly until the end of our cycle. And the quality of feedback is very important. Don't give feedback that is incomplete. Or as full of error. Feedback is important for future improvement. And I've given two methods, one-on-one, this is where supervisors and employees sit together and they look at what has been achieved. Or it could be team meetings. I prefer team meetings because sometimes we require this team effort to produce better results. So we look at our performance as a team and find out where is our weak link and where should we improve. Feedback, some feedback is because it does late and therefore it cannot be adequate and therefore it cannot be used. And three, the feedback was not clear. So this perception of feedback, it wasn't clear, it wasn't useful, can become an area of audit. Then still on performance management, we are looking at training and development, which we have already mentioned under the concept of training. What I need to add here is that when you are appraising people, you identify gaps. Some of these gaps may be related to lack of training. So you ask yourself, is there a linkage between performance outcomes and training? Yes, there is a linkage, but if you can't link this, then it becomes a problem because it can be possible that we cannot train people after performance appraisals. Why? Because why train people? Because there is no lack of skills and knowledge. And it is fairly impractical to find that a whole organization does not have people who lack certain skills and knowledge which may require training. So again, the integration of training and the performance appraisal comes into play in here. Next is the recognition and rewards. I want to mention two things. about recognition and rewards in relation to performance appraisal. One, there is a reward system called performance-related pay, where people are paid according to their performance. That if you have been given a target, you achieve that target, you are paid for it. You don't achieve targets, you don't get paid for it. The other reward system is payment by results, PBR, payment by results, especially in a commission-oriented reward system, where people are rewarded because of the checks they bring in, a percentage of what they bring. However, when we talk about reward, this is anything outside the compensation system, because compensation is what you are paid for working. Reward is any extra pay, like recognition or like a certificate of merit or a benefit. So the auditor, and this is why we are here, we look at the fairness and transparency in giving these rewards. That only those people who perform well should be given a reward, and that is fair enough. And when we are giving rewards, we should ensure transparency. And how do you ensure transparency? Allow people to participate in the allocation of these rewards, so that we don't end up rewarding people who don't merit the reward, or be like the dairy man who was awarded an award because he was eating dairy. That is not fair, and there was no transparent process to achieve that. Secondly is employee satisfaction with the reward system. What you need to carry out in this case is a reward survey. What is the level of satisfaction with this, or the attitude of people towards these rewards? And lastly, on that point is impact of recognition. We know that recognition or a reward system impacts people's motivation and performance levels. We all get motivated when the rewards are good, like a bonus. And I guess some of us are given bonuses at the end of the year. A bonus is based on performance, and that motivates people to even work better. Another area of performance management is management involvement. We are emphasizing here that the moment you engage in a performance management process, you bring everybody on board. And actually, the first people you must bring on board are the top managers. Why? Because these are the resource allocators. Two, these are the strategy formulators. And three, these are the people who will support us when we engage in this process. So the buy-in of the top managers will affect the success or failure of the performance management process or system. Secondly is training provided to managers on effective performance evaluation, meaning that not everybody can perform an evaluation. So we need to provide managers with adequate training so that they can do a good job when they are evaluating employees. And lastly, on that point is the feedback, which I've already mentioned. We all need feedback. And what is the feedback of management on the effectiveness of the system? Lastly, we have performance improvement programs or plans, where those people who are not performing are put on a plan. And this plan has to do with efforts to improve poor performance, and we must be careful to specify the frequency, the time taken, and employee feedback. In the next 3 or 4 minutes, I will talk about career and development audit so that we can ask a question or two, then we close the program. What you need to audit in development, career development, is the existence of career paths. who is responsible for this? It is the HR managers who should do this. And how do you develop this? You work in consultation with the employees concerned, because the employees know what they want in their lives, and therefore you ask them what their career objectives are, and from there you can develop a career path. In some cases, you may find that there are employees who are lost. They are not sure which careers to take based on their experience or the experience of others. So it's for us to counsel these employees. So are there career paths? Yes or no? If they are not, how can we improve this? Secondly, is the alignment of career paths with the business goals. I've already talked about alignment, but here we are saying that when you develop these career paths, at the back of our minds, we want to achieve organizational objectives. And what is this objective? Is to manage exits or to manage separations. So when we have career paths, people will succeed others. So the intention of career paths is to achieve succession plans. Thirdly is availability of relevant training programs to support this career development. So if I'm a HR officer, there must be relevant training programs to advance my skills in HR. So I will be taken for HR trainings related to recruitment, to reward management, to performance management, to training. And that is why we are here. That today we are looking at career development and other modules, so that we can improve our performance at the individual level and by extension, the departmental level. Next is accessibility and effectiveness of mentorship and coaching programs. Yes, we mentioned it earlier that mentorship and coaching are on-the-job methods of training. And if we want to prepare future leaders, we need to put in place these mentors. Mentors are senior and better performing people with whom we can partner, novices or people who want to occupy a senior position, and that is part of our career development. Next is the availability of cross-functional learning. Why? Because in modern day, we want people who have skills and knowledge in other areas. For example, we have somebody in marketing who can do something in advertising, somebody in finance who can do something in accounting, because these are related functions. And how can we do this? We can do that through job rotation and multitasking or training. The other element is fairness and transparency in promotion. Sometimes we wonder why people are promoted so fast and others stagnate. Probably it's because of performance. But in career development, we must give each person who has the potential for promotion a fair chance. So without that fairness, as HR auditors, we need to raise queries, because this can cause despondency or even demotivation among employees. And if there are no career development opportunities, the other option for these employees is to leave the organization. Then next is employee satisfaction. How happy are they with the career opportunities? Probably we are preparing careers that are not suitable for them. So if something is not suitable, there is a possibility of dissatisfaction. And availability of programs for developing future leaders. There are several programs like mentorship and coaching, delegation, being a member of our team, and also being taken for training outside the organization to equip people for leadership, and particular leadership skills or strategic management. And in that way, we shall be preparing people for career development. And lastly, we need to look at availability of programs for different groups. For example, people with disabilities, women or men, call it gender, or people with other diversities, such as slow learners. So we cannot ignore this. Having said that, I think now I will open it up because of time so that we can ask questions on performance and career development. Now the floor is ours. If you can ask your question or make a comment, I will be happy and I'm available to answer any question. Peter, how are you, Peter? Apparently Peter is not there. Sarah, Jerry? Oh, Peter, you are there. A comment? Unmute your mic. Okay. Anybody else with a comment or a question so that we can close?
Yes, I do have something to say.
Yes.
First of all, I would like to thank you for articulating the session quite well. On my side, I think it has been quite clear. The notes I have taken, I should be able to go through them and they provide me or guide me sufficiently.
Thank you.
What I wanted to find out from you,
Yes.
I have noted that you have finer details of the points on PowerPoint, which are
Yes.
very, very insightful. You're even giving very, very relevant examples and illustrations of what happened in our institutions. And I was requesting that you consider sharing, besides the slides, you consider sharing maybe a more detailed presentation or write-up of the modules that we have undertaken.
Thank you very much. One, for the compliment. I'm very happy and humbled that I've done a good job tonight. And I believe I will do a good job even tomorrow or any other day. And secondly is the issue of the detailed notes. If you are a member of the Telegram group, there are quite a lot that we usually post there and then can confirm that. However, with regard to this particular one, it is possible, but I cannot guarantee that it can be done today. But we can, we have taken note of that, and it's something that we can do.
Thank you.
Asante sana. Any other question or point, Beatrice? Okay.
Thank you for taking us through the session. It was quite clear. We appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. And I'm happy. You've made my evening, ladies and gentlemen. And on that note, I wish to appreciate you so much for participating in this program. I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, same time. I hope we shall start early. And tomorrow's module will be on auditing HR strategies and their impact on the organization. So do have a good evening and may God bless you.
Thank you, Mwalimu.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Have a good evening too.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you.